Hello, this is Brian Jackson, and this is going to be Chapter 4 of my novel Lightwarriors. Chapter 4 is titled A Threat in the Shadows. A tall, slender man in a tailored black business suit sat alone in the corner booth of a dingy diner, sipping a slug of mud. A burner phone lay on the table in front of him. He had just ended a call with command. The man was intrigued. He had never encountered anyone like this little girl. Pyrokinetic, is she? Dangerous. Rickman's warning about the girl might have frightened another man, but the tall man found it all fascinating. Anyway, he was incapable of fear. Like the girl's father, he had been stripped of that hindrance. The tall man's lips curled into a slight smile. This would be an interesting mission. A child, and a powerful and dangerous child at that. He enjoyed a challenge, and this girl would make a difficult mark. The fact that her adoptive parents possessed similar powers was a bonus. Rickman had warned that David McAuliff possessed an electrokinetic talent, and his wife, Catherine, was a telekinetic. He was to target the girl without alerting either parent or the girl herself. Failure would mean certain death. The tall man took a final sip of black swill, stood up, and dropped a few bills on the table before walking out the back door of the diner. No one saw him leave. The tall man took a second burner phone from inside his suit jacket, dialed a number, and spoke 2 sentences to the male voice that answered. "It's time. Location is previously confirmed." He then disconnected the line and discarded the phone in a dumpster behind the Starlight Diner. 5 minutes later, he was behind the wheel of a battered gray primer Ford Econoline panel van on his way to the cabin where Charlie McLeod and McAuliffs had stopped to rest. The tall man was armed only with a suppressed nickel-plate Colt Government 1911 in a left-handed shoulder holster and a nylon garrote in his right inside breast pocket. Nothing more. He could have easily shot the girl from a distance using a sniper rifle, but that would be no challenge. For the same reason, he had decided against using the Colt. The tall man desired a real challenge, and so he decided upon the garrote. 10 minutes later, the tall man had pulled onto the dirt road leading up to the log cabin. He parked the car far enough away to avoid arousing suspicion and approached the cabin on foot. He found the small building dark and quiet. The sky had gone to a deep red and purple hue. He would need to be quick to avoid detection. He did not believe that the McAuliffs would stay long into the morning for fear of capture. As he neared the cabin, the tall man mentally reviewed the description Rickman had given him of the interior layout. The cabin was a loft design with the great room and single bedroom on the ground floor, and a loft with a second bed above the great room. The tall man speculated that the girl would most likely be sleeping in the loft, while the McAuliffs would be in the ground floor bedroom. As he approached the cabin, the tall man noted that the windows had been shuttered behind caramel wood slats before silently trying the front door. The knob slipped through his fingers. Locked. He slipped a hand inside his suit jacket and withdrew a set of lockpicks from his right breast pocket. The lock opened without effort, and within 5 minutes he was inside. A single sputtering kerosene railroad lamp provided the cabin's only illumination, leaving the majority of the great room cloaked in shadow. The tall man scanned his surroundings. The great room's furnishings were of old and tattered leather. The floor consisted of scuffed hardwood planks. A bearskin rug, frosted gray from dust, lay before a cold fieldstone fireplace. To his left, a shadowy hallway led away to the cabin's ground floor bedroom and sole bathroom. Ahead of him, and a little to his left, a narrow wooden plank stairway led up to the cabin's loft. The heads of numerous slain animals festooned the walls. In the flickering shadows of the railroad lamp's dim, lone flame, they had become grotesque gargoyles. Without a sound, the tall man crossed the great room and skulked up the stairs into the loft. The railroad lamp's meager illumination did not reach up here, leaving the room bathed in shadows, broken by slivers of golden sunlight from a single narrow window in the loft's back wall. As he approached, he found the girl curled up on her left side in the loft's lone double bed, her long blonde hair splayed across the white linen pillow beneath her head. The tall man slipped his right hand inside his jacket, found the nylon girl inside, and withdrew it. The girl mumbled something in her sleep and turned onto her back. Her blonde hair fell away, exposing her pale, slender neck. Without pausing, the tall man grabbed the girl by her nightie, hauled her into a sitting position, and wrapped the nylon garrote around her throat, drawing it tight enough to stifle any sounds. As the girl struggled, he slowly tightened the ligature. The tall man enjoyed the sensation of strangling the girl. The garrote felt almost alive in his hands, as if it were conducting the girl's life force. He enjoyed the sensation of her fighting, for beneath his grasp, the terror in her pale face and deep blue eyes. Still more, he enjoyed the knowledge that he could draw the nylon cord tighter and cut into her carotid arteries or crush the vertebra in her neck, thus ending the matter instantly. The tall man had no desire to bring a quick end to the struggle. This would have made for a messy and unprofessional kill. It was his intent to leave the girl dead, with no blood and no damage to her body, and so he was careful not to draw the garrote any tighter than necessary to cut off the girl's breath. Charlie was dragged from sleep by sudden, painful breathlessness. She fought a desperate struggle to feed air to her starving lungs, but could draw no breath. Something hard and tight dug deep into her throat. She opened her eyes onto a hazy image of the loft, dimly lit in purple from the early morning sky outside. Charlie fought desperately against the hard thing that had cut off her breath. Instinctively, she reached for the power. To her immense terror, Charlie found it far away and hard to reach. Worse, she could not control it. Before she could stop it, the power flowed out of her and splattered across the wastebasket by the wall, painting it in fuzzy orange. Charlie bit the power back before it could do any further damage. The sudden realization came to her that she could not use the power to defend herself. She had lost control of it, and in any case she could not burn her attacker without harming herself as well. She was helpless. All at once, David's tall, slender frame appeared out of the growing gray blur of the loft. Charlie met his eyes. She could feel his power flowing through the air and knew what had to be done. David stood facing Charlie in her bedroom, having been ripped from sleep by the certain knowledge that something was terribly wrong. Catherine, too, had awakened, but he had ignored her and raced to Charlie's loft bedroom. Upon reaching the top of the stairs, he found Charlie sitting up in bed, wide-eyed with terror. A tall, slender man of indeterminate age stood behind her. The man had wrapped a silver ligature around Charlie's neck and was brutally strangling her. Upon seeing David, he pulled the cord still tighter and addressed David in a calm, professional tone. "Do not come any closer, or I'll open her carotid arteries." David stood frozen, too frightened to think with any clarity. He had to do something. The tall man was choking Charlie to death. David felt the power stir. In the same moment, Charlie looked up and met his eyes with hers. Her voice came to him as clear as if she had spoken aloud. "It's okay, David. It'll be all right. I'll be all right. Use the power. It's okay." Her eyes seemed to confirm what the voice in his mind had suggested. David reached into the power, at the same moment extending his hands. Jagged sheets of blue-white lightning leapt from his fingertips and lanced into the tall man and Charlie both. David was careful to keep the electrical current of his attack low while maintaining a high voltage, enough to disable but not to kill. Both Charlie and the tall man tensed for a moment as tens of thousands of volts ripped through their bodies. The tall man let out a grunt and released Charlie, who fell forward gasping. Both lay on the bed trembling. David ran to Charlie and took her into his arms. When she was safely out of the firing line, David struck out again with the power. A blazing net of white lightning raced through the air and danced over the floor, bed, and walls before tearing into the tall man's body. This time he didn't tense, but instead jerked hard enough to launch himself onto the hardwood floor. He remained in this state, frozen, as thick tendrils of electricity arced into his body. The air filled with the scent of burning human flesh as dense smoke poured out of the tall man's body. Then in another instant David withdrew his power, and it was over. The tall man lay sprawled out on the floor, obviously dead. Deep, black, charred burns covered his face and exposed skin. His clothes smoked and smoldered, but David had already forgotten him, having turned his attention to Charlie. She was weeping and still gasping for breath. David examined her to ensure she wasn't seriously injured. There was an angry, deep red mark across her throat where the nylon cord had been. David also found a second, bright red mark on the inside of her right thigh. Neither mark seemed dangerous, and Charlie appeared otherwise unharmed. David took her into his arms and tried to soothe her. After a few moments, her crying died out, and she looked at him with frightened eyes. "They're coming, David. We have to get away." As she spoke, he felt it too. Yes, I think you're right. He turned to Catherine. We need to get out of here. I think we're out of time. She nodded without a word and descended the stairs 2 at a time. David took Charlie's hand and helped her to the edge of the bed. As soon as she put weight on her legs, Charlie's right leg buckled, and she collapsed to the floor. Her face paled in terror. Oh no. She did not cry, but her fear was palpable. David was confused. What's wrong, Charlie? I think you broke it. She replied in a high, pinched voice. I think I'm poisoned. What are you talking about, Charlie? What did I break? David asked in a calm tone. The tracking implant, she answered, and then she began to explain. While she was a prisoner of the NSA, they had placed a tracking implant under the skin of her right thigh. The implant included a GPS transmitter and a vial of poison that would release if the implant was damaged or removed. It'll be okay, Charlie, David found himself saying. We'll go somewhere safe from the NSA and then get you some help. Okay, David. Her tone of voice made it clear that she was not convinced. For his own part, David was also not convinced and felt deep guilt, for it was his fault that Charlie was poisoned. 5 minutes later, they had dressed, packed their meager possessions in the car, and were headed down the dirt road on their way to the interstate. Well, for those of you listening, thank you very much for your attention, and I will be uploading the next chapter very soon. Have a nice evening.